The massive crystal towers of Vorth Prime stretched toward the blood-red sky like giant needles made of ice. Their shiny surfaces showed the reflection of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. High War Master Kethver stood at the huge window of his palace, watching the endless line of ships bringing treasure from conquered worlds across the stars. Kethver was not like humans. He had 4 strong arms, a hard shell-like skin that gleamed dark green, and 6 yellow eyes that could see in all directions. His people, the Vorthok, had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years without losing a single war. The secret of their power was simple, but terrible. First, they would scare their enemies so badly that they gave up without fighting. Then, if that did not work, they would attack with such overwhelming force that resistance was impossible. Every species that had ever tried to stand against them had been crushed, enslaved, or destroyed. "War Master," came a voice behind him. Kethver turned to see his assistant, Subcommander Thelmos, walking toward him with the perfect posture of a trained soldier. "The scout ships have found something interesting in the outer edge of the galaxy." Kethver's jaw parts clicked together, which was how his people showed mild interest. "Another group of primitives playing with radio signals, I suppose." "Yes." "War Master, you're sending out entertainment shows and simple messages, nothing advanced. The planet is mostly water with one main intelligent species living on it." A glowing image appeared in the air between them, showing a small blue and green world spinning slowly in space. It looked peaceful and harmless, with brown and green land masses scattered across its surface. "How many of these creatures live there?" Kethver asked, though he did not really care about the answer. "About 7 billion, War Master. They look like they walk on 2 legs and are made of carbon, just like many species we have conquered before. We see no energy shields protecting their world and no weapons in space. Their best weapons seem to be simple rockets that use chemical fuel." Kethver made a sound like stones crushing together, which was how his people laughed. 7 billion primitives, all crowded onto one small world. It's perfect. They will work well in our mining colonies in the empty regions of space. Send a diplomatic ship to them. Use the standard approach. Right away, War Master." As Thelmos walked away to carry out the orders, Kethver returned to watching the tribute ships. Each vessel represented another world that had learned to fear the Vorthok Empire. Some had fought and been destroyed. Others had surrendered immediately when they saw the size of the Vorthok fleet. All had learned the same lesson in the end. Resistance was useless. The War Master remembered the last species that had tried to fight back. The Nexari had been more advanced than the Vorthok in many ways. They had faster ships, better computers, and weapons that could destroy entire moons. But they had one weakness. They fought with honor. They announced their attacks, fought in organized formations, and tried to minimize damage to civilian populations. The Vorthok had no such weaknesses. They had broadcast the screams of captured Nexari across their entire communication network. They had targeted civilian cities first, not military bases. They had made it clear that surrender was the only way to save their people from total destruction. Within 6 months, the proud Nexari had become slaves. Their advanced technology turned against other species who dared to oppose the hegemony. Now, as Kethver looked out at his empire, he felt the deep satisfaction of a predator who had never met an equal. The galaxy was his hunting ground, and every species in it was either his property or his prey. The humans of the small blue world would be no different. They had no idea that their peaceful radio signals had been detected by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They probably still thought they were alone in the universe, safe on their little planet. Soon, they would learn the truth. Soon they would understand that their world, their lives, and their future belonged to the Vorthok hegemony. They would be given the same choice that every other species had received: submit completely or be destroyed completely. Kethver had no doubt which option they would choose. After all, every species chose survival in the end.
Oh, yes.
Fear was a universal language, and the Vorthok spoke it fluently. The diplomatic ship would arrive at the human world within days. The captain would make the usual demands, demonstrate the usual superiority, and accept the usual surrender. Then the real work would begin, cataloging the humans' useful skills, dividing them into work groups, and shipping them to wherever the Empire needed slave labor. It would be just another routine conquest in the long history of Vorthok dominance. After all, what could a bunch of primitives with chemical rockets possibly do against the masters of the galaxy? Gethber's 6 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched another tribute ship dock at his capital. The hegemony had never known defeat, and these humans would be just another addition to their vast collection of conquered species. The galaxy belonged to the Vorthok, and it always would. Ambassador Velthane sat in his command chair aboard the great ship Subjugator's Pride as it moved through the human solar system. He had done this exact same thing hundreds of times before, with hundreds of different species. The process was always the same and always worked. First, he would contact the primitive species and show them how powerful the Vorthok were. Then, he would demand that they surrender immediately. Most species would panic, cry, or try to run away. After they realized they could not escape, they would beg for mercy and agree to become slaves. It was simple and efficient, but as his ship approached the third planet from the sun, something felt different. His communications officer, a young Vorthok named Kilthara, looked up from her control panel with a confused expression. "Ambassador," she said slowly, "we are getting a message from the planet, but it is not what we usually receive." "Show me," Velthane ordered. Expecting to see the usual display of primitive leaders cowering in fear, the main viewing screen came to life, and Velthane saw something that made him pause. A human female appeared on the screen, wearing what looked like a military uniform. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her dark eyes looked directly at him, without any sign of fear or panic. "I am Colonel Lee Min-young of the United Earth Defense Command," the human said in a calm, steady voice. "We have been watching your ship approach our system. We assume you want to talk to us." Velthane felt his throat sacs tighten with confusion. In all his years as a diplomatic ambassador for the hegemony, no species had ever greeted him this way. Where was the terror? Where were the desperate attempts to hide or escape? This human was acting like she had been expecting him to arrive. "I am Ambassador Velthane of the Vorthok hegemony," he replied, activating the special fear systems built into his ship. These systems would make his image appear larger and more threatening, while sending out sound waves that made most creatures feel afraid. "Your world now belongs to the hegemony. You must surrender right now and prepare to become part of our empire." Colonel Lee did not even blink. She showed no sign that the fear systems were affecting her at all. "That is not going to happen, Ambassador. We suggest you turn your ship around and go back where you came from." The words hit Velthane like a physical blow. Never in the 3,000-year history of the hegemony had a primitive species refused their first demand. It was impossible. It went against everything he knew about how these situations were supposed to work. "You dare to refuse the hegemony?" Velthane's voice rose to a roar. "Look at your helplessness." He gestured to his weapons officer, who immediately powered up the ship's main guns and aimed them at one of the planet's major cities. The energy readings should be visible to anyone with basic sensors. "This is your last warning, humans. Surrender now or watch your cities burn." Colonel Lee looked at something on her wrist and then back at the screen. "Ambassador, there is something you should know. We have been preparing for this conversation much longer than you think. Dr. Yoon Tae-jin, would you please join us?" The screen split in half, showing a second human. This one was an older man with gray hair and cold, calculating eyes. "Ambassador Velthane," he said politely, "I have been studying your species for quite some time. Your ship is currently being targeted by 17 different weapon systems. Those objects you thought were space junk, they are not junk." Velthane's tactical officer suddenly straightened up in alarm. "Ambassador, multiple contacts are appearing around the planet. Energy signatures are impossible. How did they hide them?" "Fire a warning shot," Velthane screamed. "Destroy one of their satellites. Show them what happens when they defy us. The subjugator's pride fired its main weapon at what appeared to be a communications satellite orbiting the human world. The powerful beam struck the target and vaporized it instantly in a bright flash of light. Colonel Lee's expression did not change at all. That was a mistake, Ambassador. What happened next would be remembered in hegemony military history as the first impossible moment of the war with humanity. The objects that the Vorthok had dismissed as space debris suddenly revealed themselves to be weapon platforms that had been hiding in plain sight. They had been disguised as broken satellites, asteroids, floating garbage. The first attack came from kinetic weapons that fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. The subjugator's Pride S energy shields, designed to stop laser and plasma weapons, were completely useless against chunks of metal traveling at nearly the speed of light. Hull breaches erupted across 3 levels of the ship. Impossible. Velthane screamed as his ship shook under the impacts. You are primitives. How do you have weapons like this? Kinetic kill vehicles, Dr. Yoon explained calmly as more projectiles slammed into the hegemony ship. We have had them in orbit for 2 years, along with some other surprises. The second wave of attacks came from directions that made no tactical sense. Human weapons appeared from the surface of their moon, from structures throughout their solar system, and even from what had looked like civilian space stations. Retreat, Velthane ordered, but his navigation officer was staring at his instruments in horror. Ambassador, they have somehow disabled our faster-than-light engines.
Oh.
We are trapped in normal space. Colonel Lee's voice cut through the chaos. On the bridge. Ambassador, this is your final warning. Leave our system immediately, or we will show you why every predator on our world learned to fear humans. The subjugator's pride limped away from Earth with massive damage to its hull and systems. For the first time in 3,000 years, a hegemony ship had been forced to retreat by a species they had intended to conquer, as the ship finally escaped the solar system and restored its hyperdrive. Velthane sent an emergency message to Vorth Prime. Request immediate military intervention. The humans are not what they appear to be. High War Master Kethver stood in the control room of his massive warship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was over 1 kilometer long and carried enough weapons to destroy entire planets. He had brought it to human space expecting an easy victory, but now he stared at the battle reports with growing shock and anger. What should have been a simple punishment. Mission had turned into the first real military problem the hegemony had faced in 3,000 years. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Vorthok had ever encountered before. Give me your report, Kethver, commanded his tactical officer, Subcommander Vexthera. War Master, Vexthera said, and her voice carried a note of confusion. That would have been impossible to imagine just months before. The humans have attacked our fleets in 14 different star systems. Their fighting methods are completely new to us. They will not stand and fight us in open battle like honorable warriors. Instead, they attack our supply convoys, ambush, lone ships, and disappear before we can strike back. Kethver's jaw parts ground together in frustration. They are cowards. How many ships do they have? That is the problem, War Master. Our intelligence reports say they have less than 1/3 as many ships as we do. Their vessels are also less advanced than ours in almost every way. But somehow they are winning battles that our computer models said were impossible for them to win. The holographic display in front of them showed the wreckage from their most recent defeat. A convoy of hegemony supply ships had been completely destroyed by what appeared to be unmanned human attack craft. These small ships had somehow disguised themselves as asteroids and floated silently in space until the convoy passed by. Then, they had struck without warning. The most shocking part was how the lead hegemony vessel had been destroyed. A human ship had simply flown straight into it at tremendous speed, with the human crew apparently accepting certain death in order to destroy a target that was 10 times larger than their own ship. They fight without honor, Kethver growled. No civilized species has ever behaved this way. But even as he said it, reports were coming in of more impossible human victories. In the Kepler system, a small human fleet had somehow turned the hegemony's own plasma weapons against them, using captured Vorthok technology to destroy 3 dreadnoughts In the Vega sector, human engineers had infiltrated a major hegemony fortress and caused it to explode from within. Commander Lok Jin-woo would have been happy to explain how they did it, if anyone had asked. The human engineers stood in the captured hegemony weapon emplacement, watching his mixed team of humans and aliens work to reverse engineer the alien technology with desperate efficiency. The plasma focusing systems are actually quite simple once you understand the basic principles. He explained to his second-in-command, Captain Bae Sa-young. Once we figured out how one system worked, we could understand all of them. The hegemony uses the same technology everywhere. How long did it take your team to crack their security codes? Bae asked, looking at the technical readouts on her tablet computer. 72 hours from first examination to working weapon. Their technology is advanced, but it is also standardized. Once you break into one system, you can break into all of them. This was the nightmare that hegemony strategists had never considered, an enemy that did not break under pressure, but actually became stronger and more dangerous with each battle. Humans did not just fight their technological superiors, they learned from them, adapted their methods, and turned their enemies' own advantages against them. Back on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Kethfer received the report he had been dreading. The Jeltar systems conquered over 1,000 years ago had gone silent. Not destroyed, but silent. Their communication networks were still working, but they were no longer responding to hegemony commands. Send a patrol squadron to investigate, Kethfer ordered. Though he suspected he already knew what they would find. The patrol found the Jeltar. Homeworld intact but completely changed. The crystal cities that had once broadcast songs of submission to the hegemony now transmitted something entirely different. Tactical data, weapon specifications, and most disturbing of all, recorded messages from human military commanders. Commander Honda Salma, the Human Liberation Fleet, had spent 3 months on the Geltar homeworld. Not as a conqueror, but as a teacher. Her message was simple. We have proven the hegemony can be defeated. Now we will show you how to do it yourselves. The response was immediate and spread across the entire galaxy. The Kithara collective, broken apart by centuries of oppression, began to reunify around a single goal: revenge against their former masters. The Nexari, their advanced technology carefully watched and controlled by hegemony overseers, started building secret weapons in hidden laboratories on asteroids and moons. Most terrifying of all, the humans seemed to be coordinating these different resistance movements with impossible efficiency. Intelligence reports suggested they had somehow created a communication network that spanned the galaxy, sending information faster than hegemony messenger ships. It cannot be done, Vexthera reported during the daily briefing. No species has ever managed to unite the galaxy's conquered races. They hate each other almost as much as they hate us. Kethfer studied the tactical display showing rebellion. Spreading across 17 different sectors, red symbols marked hegemony defeats, yellow showed contested systems, and green showed areas still under control. There was very little green left. What makes these humans different? He asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. The answer came from an unexpected source. A hegemony spy working undercover in human territory transmitted a single recorded conversation between 2 human soldiers sharing a meal in a captured hegemony station. "Do you ever wonder why we are winning this war?" asked Private Kim Min-sik, barely old enough to have seen Earth before the invasion began. His companion, Sergeant Oh the Jin, a veteran of the first battles around Earth, smiled grimly. "Because we remember what it is like to be prey. Every species. The hegemony conquered. They broke their fighting spirit first. Made them forget how to fight back. But humans? We have been fighting for survival since we first walked upright. We never forgot that sometimes the only choice you have is to show your teeth and charge forward. Even when you are outgunned, especially. When you are outgunned, that is when you fight the hardest." When Kethfer heard this recording, he finally understood the true nature of the threat facing the hegemony. This was not just another rebellion. This was an existential war against a species that refused to accept defeat as a possibility, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony was losing. Admiral Choi Hyjin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the youth's defiance, looking at the huge enemy fleet through her tactical display screens. Around her ship, the largest combined fleet in the history of the galaxy was getting ready for battle. This would either free the galaxy from tyranny or be humanity's last fight. "Give me a status report," she commanded. Her voice was calm and strong, the kind of voice that had earned her respect from 12 different alien species who now fought alongside humans. "All human battle groups are in position," reported Captain Shinwoo Jin from his control station. "The Gelter crystal ships have moved to their assigned locations. The Cathura biological ships are holding formation in the outer ring. The Nexari stealth vessels are. Well, we think they are where they are supposed to be."
Finally, something impossible had happened.
After 3 years of brutal warfare, all the scattered resistance movements across the galaxy had come together under human leadership. They had formed something the galaxy had never seen before, a coalition of free species willing to fight for their independence. Fleet Admiral Park Junho, the overall commander of all liberation forces, opened a communication channel that reached every ship in the massive fleet. "All vessels, this is Admiral Park. In 1 hour, we begin our attack on Vorth Prime. For 3,000 years, the hegemony has ruled through fear. Today, we show them what happens when the galaxy fights back." The response came from thousands of ships speaking dozens of different languages. But the message from all of them was the same: defiance. On the surface of Vorth Prime, High War Master Kethver watched the approaching fleet with something that might have been admiration. Humans had done what everyone said was impossible. They had united the galaxy's downtrodden peoples into a force capable of challenging hegemony supremacy. "War Master," his aide Thelmus reported. "Intelligence estimates they have over 4,000 vessels in the approaching fleet. However, our orbital defense platforms and the home fleet should be enough to destroy them." The first wave of human attacks hit the outer defense stations with coordination unlike anything the hegemony had ever faced. But these were not the same desperate fighters who had ambushed supply convoys in distant star systems. These were disciplined military units working in perfect harmony with their alien allies. Geltar crystal ships focused their energy weapons on the massive shield generators that protected Vorth Prime's orbital shipyards. Kithra biological ships released clouds of living interceptors that swarmed around hegemony fighter craft like angry insects. Nexari stealth vessels suddenly appeared inside the defensive perimeter, having somehow bypassed sensors that had never failed before, and the humans fought with a fury that defied all understanding. Commander Li Doyun piloted her fighter through a maze of defensive fire, her squadron of mixed human and alien craft weaving between massive hegemony battleships like predators hunting their prey. When her ship took critical damage from enemy fire, she did not retreat or try to escape. Instead, she aimed her crippled fighter at the nearest enemy capital ship and pushed her engines to maximum power. For Earth. She screamed as her fighter, loaded with every explosive her crew could fit inside it, struck the enemy battleship's main reactor section. The explosion that followed destroyed 3 more hegemony vessels and opened a gap in their defensive formation that human assault ships immediately rushed through. Captain Nam Jun Soo, commanding the heavy cruiser Soul's Vengeance, watched his friends sacrifice and felt the cold rage that had sustained humanity through 3 years of desperate war. All weapons target their command vessel, show them the price of threatening Earth. But the real turning point in the battle came not from space, but from within Vorth Prime itself. The hegemony had ruled for so long through fear and intimidation that they had forgotten their greatest vulnerability, the countless slave species who had built their empire with their own hands. Engineer Kang Min-ho had been working with the underground resistance for months, preparing for this exact moment. When the orbital battle began, he transmitted a simple code phrase to resistance cells hidden across the planet. "The sun rises on a free galaxy." The response was immediate and devastating. Geltar workers in the crystal refineries sabotaged the power grid that fed the planetary defense systems. Cathora maintenance crews in the defense control centers transmitted override codes directly to the human fleet. Nexori technicians disabled the planetary energy shields from the inside. High War Master Kethfer watched in horror as his supposedly impregnable fortress world began to crumble from within. How? He demanded of his staff. How did they coordinate all of this? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Song Haiyang, the human scientist who had been captured during the war's early months, had been imprisoned in the hegemony's maximum security facility. But imprisonment had given her access to something invaluable: political prisoners from every species the hegemony had ever conquered. "You made a critical mistake, War Master," she said as her cell door was opened by Geltar resistance fighters. "You kept us all in the same prison complex. We had 3 years to plan this moment together." The Battle of Vorth Prime lasted 6 months. It was not the quick victory that either side had expected, but a grinding siege that slowly strangled the heart of the hegemony. As their orbital defenses fell one by one, and their ground forces faced constant sabotage, the hegemony leadership finally understood the full scope of their defeat. The end came not with a glorious last stand, but with a simple communication. From Admiral Park to High War Master Kethfer: "Surrender your forces, and we will show you the mercy you never showed to others." Kethfer's response would be remembered in the histories of every free species. What mercy could primitives possibly offer to the hegemony? Admiral Park's reply was equally memorable: the mercy of beings who remember what it means to be free. The hegemony's formal surrender came 3 days later, but the galaxy had already heard the message that would echo through history. From the Outer Rim territories to the galactic core, the roar of revolution drowned out 3,000 years of enforced silence. The galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months after the fall of Vorth Prime, Admiral Park Junha stood in what had once been the throne room of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The crystal walls that had once shown the light of 1,000 conquered worlds now displayed the colorful flags of the Free Species Coalition. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just 3 years before. High War Master Kethfer sat in chains before the tribunal. His 4 arms were bound, and his once proud posture had been reduced to the tired slump of total defeat. But even now, facing judgment for his crimes, he maintained the desperate dignity of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You plan to execute me," he said, his voice still carrying hints of his former imperial arrogance. "I accept this fate. But I demand to know one thing. How did your primitive species achieve the impossible?" Dr. Yang Sujin stepped forward from the group of coalition officials. She had spent the entire war studying hegemony tactics and psychology, searching for the weaknesses that could bring down a 3,000-year-old empire. "You want to understand how we won?" she asked, looking at the data on her tablet. "It is simple, War Master. You ruled through fear, but you never truly understood what fear actually is." Kethfer's 6 eyes focused on her with genuine curiosity. Even facing execution, the soldier in him needed to understand how he had been defeated. "Fear is not just terror," Dr. Yang continued, gesturing to the mixed crowd of humans and aliens filling the tribunal chamber. "Fear is also awareness. It is the recognition of danger. It is the instinct to survive. Every species you conquered, you broke their fighting spirit first. You made them forget how to be afraid in the way that truly matters. You made them forget how to be afraid enough to fight back." She pointed to the representatives from dozens of different species who had come to witness the trial. "But humans, we have been afraid our entire evolutionary history. Afraid of predators, afraid of the dark, afraid of each other, afraid of the vast emptiness between the stars. Fear did not break us. It forged us into something you could never understand." Minister Lim Suri, representing the coalition's diplomatic wing, added her own perspective. "Your empire was built on the assumption that terror creates submission. But you forgot that terror can also create unity. Every atrocity you committed, every world you destroyed, gave the galaxy a common enemy to fear more than they feared each other." Kethfer listened with the fascination of a professional soldier learning about a completely alien way of thinking, about warfare, and now, what happens to my people? The question had been debated for weeks in the coalition councils. Some species demanded complete destruction and revenge for centuries of oppression. Others argued for permanent imprisonment to ensure the hegemony could never threaten anyone again. It was Commander Chen Minkyun, the human officer who had led the final assault. On the hegemony's command center, who provided the answer that would define the new galactic order, "Your people will have the same choice we offered every species during this war," she said firmly. "Freedom or tyranny. Those who choose freedom will be welcomed into the coalition as equals. Those who choose tyranny will be stopped, but not exterminated. We refuse to become what you were." The tribunal's verdict was unprecedented in galactic history. The hegemony leadership would face justice for their crimes, but the Vorthok people would be offered a chance at redemption. Some would accept, slowly integrating into the new galactic community. Others would retreat to their core worlds, nursing ancient grudges and impossible dreams of restoration. But the galaxy had changed in ways that made such dreams meaningless. Captain An Donghain commanded one of the new exploration fleets. His ships were crewed by volunteers from dozens of species and equipped with technology that combined the best innovations from every coalition member. His mission was simple: explore the unknown regions beyond former hegemony space, make contact with new civilizations, and carry a message that would have been impossible just 3 years before. Unknown vessel, this is Captain An of the coalition starship New Dawn. He transmitted to the alien craft his sensors had detected in the outer Vale region. "We come in peace, seeking trade and friendship. We offer technology, knowledge, and protection to any who desire it." The response came in a language his universal translator had never encountered. But the tone was unmistakable: suspicion, fear, and the desperate hostility of beings who had learned to expect only conquest from strangers. "We understand your caution," Captain An continued, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone who had learned diplomacy in the hardest possible school. "We too were once threatened by those who came bearing false promises of peace. But we learned something important. Sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to be strong enough to defend it and wise enough to know when not to fight." It would take hours of careful negotiation, but eventually the alien vessel would accept a meeting. They would learn about the coalition, about the war that had freed the galaxy, and about the humans who had somehow united dozens of species around a single principle: the right to be free. Years later, historians would mark the moment when Captain Visavella An's message was first broadcast as the beginning of the second galactic era. The first era had been defined by the hegemony's rule through fear. The second would be defined by something unprecedented in galactic history: voluntary cooperation between equals. Dr. Kim Unesio, now director of the Coalition's historical archives, concluded her research with a simple observation that would become the unofficial motto of the new galactic order: the hegemony taught the galaxy to fear, humanity taught it to hope. But more importantly, we taught it that hope and fear are not opposites. They are allies. Hope for something better, fear of losing it, and the courage to fight for both. The last entry in her official report was a quote from the Coalition's founding charter, written by representatives of 47 different species in the immediate aftermath of their victory. "We have heard the roar of tyranny and chosen to roar back. Let all who would threaten freedom know, the galaxy sleeps lightly, and we remember how to show our teeth." The new galactic order had begun, built not on the ashes of the defeated, but on the dreams of the free.